Okay, good evening. I'm Gregory Western, the Executive Director of the National Academy of Design. Whoa, bright lights. Thank you for coming out, for being intrepid and braving the rain to come out to tonight's program. You will all get a glass of wine in exchange for showing up. Thank you. All right, so thank you for joining us for tonight's program. Before we get started, please silence your phones, and I'd like to read our historical acknowledgement. The National Academy of Design was initiated by artists and architects to fill a void in the American artistic landscape of the 19th century. But we recognize our history has excluded many communities and cultures whose lineages and practices must be included in this country's art historical canon. Indigenous peoples, people of color, queer and non-binary individuals, and peoples with different abilities. We are committed to a process of dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and white supremacy. We are excited to move forward and to have conversations that reflect the important questions and issues of today. So today, our program this evening is a one-on-one conversation between designer and professor of architecture, Carlos Jiménez, National Academician, principal of Carlos Jiménez Studio, and Patricio del Real, PhD, associate professor of the history of art and architecture at Harvard University. The evening will feature an overview of Jimenez's 40-year practice and a focus on his project for Won Buddhism of Houston, 2015 to 21, which is on view next door in our exhibition, Sites of Impermanence. Jimenez understands architecture's value as a life force, generous and sustaining, inspiring and optimistic, ancient and modern, wise and expectant, discreet and intrepid, ephemeral and enduring. That is quite a list of adjectives. For him, it is also built thought, whose unfolding pages are built by time alone. So I will do some quick introductory bios, and then we will get started with the program. Carlos was born in San Jose, Costa Rica in 1959, and moved to the United States in 1974. He received his BArch in 1981 from the University of Houston, the city where he still lives and works. Jimenez is a tenured professor of architecture at Rice University School of Architecture and a frequent lecturer, juror, and visiting critic at national and international universities and cultural institutions. He founded Carlos Jiménez Studio 40 years ago with a belief in the radical power of simple forms, which he considers to be the most sustainable, relevant, and adaptable in a world overwhelmed by profligate waste, delusions of progress, and urgent social and environmental challenges. A small office by choice, the studio works on one project at a time and is still located in the same place where it began, a set of interconnected buildings surrounded by new and venerable live oak trees. The office's work can be found in a variety of places, from Marfa, Texas to Columbus, Indiana, from the Berkshire Mountains to North Philadelphia, from the hills of Austin to the San Juan Islands, from the outskirts of Paris to the Mediterranean city of Gandia, Spain. Patricio del Real is an architectural historian who works on modern architecture and its transnational connections with a focus on the Americas. His book, Constructing Latin America, Architecture, Politics, and Race at the Museum of Modern Art, analyzes how architecture exhibitions were mobilized as cultural weapons during the era of Pan-Americanism. Del Real is an associate professor of the history of art and architecture at Harvard, as I've already said. That's it for me, and I turn it over to the two of you. Yes.
Introduction today, as we already know. We have the pleasure of having here with us Carlos Jiménez, who is a distinguished architect and educator. Early on in Carlos' career, Italian architect Aldo Rossi characterized Carlos's work as fragile, that is, as having the analogous fragility of the human condition. This was a powerful observation. After all, our being in the world is marked by impermanence, and an architecture that reminds us of this is all the more important, particularly in times like ours, marked by uncertainty. Today we can find out if Carlos agrees with this characterization, since we have him here today to discuss his work and career, and I see no better stage to do so than the one provided by the National Academy of Design and the exhibition Sites of Impermanence. So please join me in welcoming architect Carlos Jiménez.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Thank you, Patricio, for that gracious introduction as well, Gregory. Great. And really more importantly, importantly, thank you to the National Academy of Design. I've been very honored to have this selection surprised me last year, and I tried to fulfill its mandate as well as I can. But I've been very rewarded by meeting so many of you here, and from, of course, Greg, Natalia, Sophia, Sarah, everybody. There's quite a few, and Frank lately has been my saving angel in technology. And anyway, but really thank you, all of you, because it represents a commitment, I believe, in what an institution can do to bring and highlight the work of so many individuals that commit themselves to their particular art. Mine is a humble art, if I can use that term. I see myself primarily more as a builder of worlds, particular worlds that become part of my daily activities with clients, with my students, with friends. And when I received the invitation to prepare this lecture based on Sarah Reisman's essay title, I said to myself, wow, this is a perfect title for the place where I live, which is called Houston, Texas. And I thought, how amazing. And I want to explain a little bit briefly in a short introduction. I don't want to tax your evening today, because I want to talk about the particular project that is next door. But I thought it was important to perhaps expand on the meaning of Sites of Impermanence. And Patricio brought up this idea of transience, this idea of our shortness in life in terms of how quickly we move on, but how extensive our experiences can counter that. And what I mean by that is that architecture for me has always been, I'm not interested in form, I'm not interested in all of the fireworks that of late seem to accumulate about it. I'm more interested in the things that happen in architecture, because they seem to me to be the true meaning of this ephemeral pleasure, this impermanence, that architecture manages to sustain simply by stepping back. And that doesn't mean that it does not participate, it means that it steps back so that this incredible accumulation of moments, this ephemeral, transient, impermanent experiences that we all human beings come to feel and to record in our lives happen. Of course, it's that quality of being, or a state of transient that I'm defining here. But there's also something that ties this talk with the building that I'm going to describe in more detail, the Won Buddhist temple in Houston. And it's that philosophical problem of change, a concept addressed in a variety of religions, not just Buddhism and other philosophies. So I want you to keep in mind these three definitions as I go forward with some insights into Sites of Impermanence. And I said that when I received the title of the exhibition and the title for the lecture, I thought how interesting that I have always described Houston as this permanent state of impermanence. And that paradox is what makes this city so sometimes difficult to deal with, but also exciting in other ways. And I'm going to try to explain in some manner. But here you see the totality of this vast, massive monster of a city that spreads into the Gulf of Mexico in this kind of unrestrained illusion of freedom that has always been at its core, this driven individuality that characterizes this city, particularly in the realm of other cities in the United States. This is the most, I would say, intrepid and most, at times, I would say even perhaps intrepid is too positive a word, more like, it's more like defiant, in the sense that it observes no regulations about how it expands its territories. It's a city driven primarily by the individual force. The collective force can only be found in these infrastructures, as you see here, that work as these endless rivers that populate and expand the city in a total delusional sense of freedom, as I call it. Because everybody's pressed out into this totally unsustainable reality, as you see here in this drawing that we did with students at Rice University, where this massive city where you can imagine the lack of density that such an accumulation of cities produces, and then this sort of aura of believing that adding more freeways is going to somehow solve the problem. And we know that that's not the case. So Houston is intrepid in this audacity to believe that somehow it has marked the future. I was remembering recently a great Werner Fassbinder film called Lola, after World War II in Berlin. There's an amazing image of Houston because the new urban planner of the city of Berlin sees Houston as the future. And I thought, how interesting. Well. And so in 1977, this is when I arrived in this strange city. I grew up in another city called San Jose, a very dense city, full of greenery and gardens. And I came here and I said, well, I knew Houston was known for its adventures in the moon, but I didn't think they had to make their landscape such an expression of this lunar, sort of almost devastated, desiccated space. And what you see here is what is still rampant in our city, which is this constant impermanent sense of its own fabric. So what you're seeing here in 1977, when I remember arriving in August of 1977, and this is what I found. This is it was very typical. Since then, the city has been slowly densifying, but this was the state. They will remove buildings so that they will put parking lots, and this was the formula of the moment. But soon after my arrival, and I opened my office just a few years after that, 1982, 83, and I began to realize that there was another reason why this predilection for impermanence, for the idea of this possibility, and it had to do with the fact that memory was the least available of let us say, the possibilities for building a city. That shortness of memory, that amnesia, weighted down by the possibility of fast profit, is what ruled the city. And Houston can be characterized, or I can say it in a different way, as one of the most exquisite examples of a capitalist city almost out of control. And the only places where some control happens might be, and by control I mean some sense of densification, or some sense of let us say, curtailing this destructive freedom, this illusion of freedom that I described. And you see situations like this. This was a 1950 building by SOM, one of the most beautiful buildings in the history of that practice. An incredible building ahead of its time, 1950, it faces west, all the windows were sealed off. It only opened to the east and discreetly to the north, and you can see what happens. These two photographs I took almost a month away from existing and being demolished. And I don't, out of respect to the SOM, I will not show you what they replace it with. But this is the fascinating thing in a certain way about this intrepid, stubborn city. It doesn't seem to learn the lessons. And maybe it is a mirror for our own selves as in this sort of notion of what progress means. And you see these buildings that are erected, and you see the first layer is to protect the automobile, because that's fundamental in the city. And then the layers get thinner and thinner as they go up. And you can see the categories of SHEATING, because if I say that word, it sounds like something else, and I don't want to say it. But anyway, you can see the kind of the desperation to extract out of that orange all of the drops to make the most profit. And it's a city that always presents itself with this a formal authority of power, with these individual buildings that now seem to, I would say, parts of Manhattan have become a little bit like Houston in this sort of effort to singularize every activity of architecture. And Houston is very much like that, and it's become symbolic of that. But it's also a city that cannot defeat the power of the nature that it has built or disregarded. Houston was built on basically a swamp, it's a sort of swampy land full of bayous. And the bayous have been, many of them have been blocked or have been built upon. And every so often, I have already survived 12 hurricanes in my time in Houston, and of course the most devastating was Harvey, which was in 2017 that you see here and you read all over the news. But Allison, Alicia, there's been Ike was probably my favorite art of all, if I had to choose, because at least Ike had the precision of its timing. He said, I will be in your city at 3:30 p.m. I will be out of there by 6 o'clock. Sorry, you take care of your city after that. And this hurricane came, did exactly that or something like that, and left. But Harvey was not like that. Harvey was a tricky beast. And the day that was supposed to come, nothing happened. The next morning, nothing happened. And then midday on Saturday, everything had been closed since Friday. It started raining for 4 days, non-stop. And this is what happened. And then we get these other biblical calamities, like a snow and a freeze that exposed the nerves of a system running amok. In this case, all of the electrical network collapsed because of this unsuspected freeze, and the city was paralyzed like during hurricanes, as you see in this beautiful image. And yet, in this desperation to forge its willpower upon this prairie, upon this swampy terrain, Houston has a perplexing and enigmatic and sometimes piercing beauty that you find in moments like this that I collect throughout the day, this marvelous carpet of treescapes where the true life of Houston takes place. And in a way, the city is being densified, not by built structure, but by the propensity and the intensity of this landscape that's saturated with this rainwater from all these rainy season and hurricanes allows it to grow. And so from the projects that, and I'm going to go into the Buddhist Center very quickly, but the projects that we have done in the city have asked this question: what is it that one can do in this maelstrom of impermanence that makes up really the character of the city? And in this case, a building in the museum district, a project of 30 plus years ago, what we did is basically try to make out of the object, because it's a city built by single objects everywhere, we wanted the object to have this broader conversation with all of the participants around its context. And so it begins even to acknowledge that the solitary pedestrian, or that occasional pedestrian that passes through our building, could have this other dimension, this other experience, that although ephemeral, gives the sense of how it might be possible to inhabit this city of such resolute intentions. And so everything about this building is about prolonging that ephemeral, that transient experience, from widening the sidewalk, from preserving all the oak trees. I mean, we fought with the trustees to preserve those trees because they wanted the parking to come in from the front, so we put it in the back, little things like that. And so writing about this for Architectural Records some years back, I spoke about the building illustrating a commitment towards more durable structures that can resist the vicissitudes of fashion program. Buildings remain not in their vertiginous present, but in the gradual unfolding of their futures. Architecture becomes the residual, yet every space, every ever-present space in between. And that is something that I can best characterize in my own personal story of my own studio started in 1983, where I wanted this relationship, this desire to commingle with this larger context that's just beyond the single building. And so the conversation in this is very, I built this little studio with meager money that I had at the time to the agency of credit cards made possible. In those days when students that graduated were given to them without much credit checks. Welcome to that time of economic history, but nonetheless I took full advantage of that, and all I had was this to build, and it started a kind of narrative that through 40 years has grown and grown and grown, and it's become many things, but always with this awareness that everything is transient. And yet the only thing that gives permanence to that transience is the insistence that architecture is something beyond form itself. It's more this accumulation of experiences, and something that I tried to write a little bit in a publication dedicated to the project, and I will read it very quickly, but my studio and my house and studio are a living thing. They're simple container-like forms hold 1,000 memories and 1,000 more to be. Every day I look forward to crossing the street between each building, encountering on either short journey something I have never seen before, something I have seen countless times. As I write these lines, Houston's early spring saturates the city with the subtlest tonalities of green. I am reminded of other springs, of other architectures, of the forgiving aroma of the sea. The world always moves slowly across the enormous weight of each day. Architecture invites moments of profound lightness. Its volumes, its spaces, have the ability to ground us while revealing the materiality of that which remains constant. And so it has been for me, and I get lost in this project because everything has a particular meaning. Planting a tree, adding a wall, adding more landscape, finding new surprises, building across the street, building next to the studio, another project, a house. And lately, I mean, this is just one of the many iterations that you saw. This one, 2018, now I'm doing another one, and I guess I'll keep doing it until my transient time comes to something else. And so I just pass these images quickly because they're always, if you notice, they're always in movement. A room that was a deck to shelter from the sun becomes suddenly another space, and a garden, or it becomes, part of it becomes an apartment, or a place to read, or to remove oneself from the other parts of the buildings. And I'm going to end with this last reflection, and then I will talk briefly about the Buddhist Center. And this is another project, and I only wanted to show these three projects as an introduction because they deal with this phenomenon of transience in more specific terms, and you can debate or counter that. But in this particular case, we're talking about a geological time, Marfa, Texas. This place was once submerged in water, and the Davis Mountains, which have remained there for eons of time. And this possibility of placing a house in the middle of this splendid landscape, this desert of Chihuahua, and the sense of the architecture is that momentary transition and transience in itself, and yet how to make it last longer, which is always what fascinates me about architecture. It's not so much about materiality necessarily, it's about making those ephemeral moments last longer. And so each of the conditions of the architecture is aimed towards that goal. And when you're inside the house, there are many moments in the house, and this one is probably my favorite one, where we brought this enormous piece of dust. It's almost 22 feet, and to face the Davis Mountains, as if the whole reason for this house was to come here and witness the beauty of this extraordinary landscape. And sometimes when I've been there, I stayed in the house sometimes, and I went to grab a glass of wine or a glass of water, whatever it was, in my mind, and then I came back, and the mountains were gone. And I said, what happened? And they were gone. And these massive winds that almost touched the ground, stampede through the horizon. And other times I will come back, and this is not my photograph, the other one was, but this was used for some other purpose. But here you see the landscape suddenly almost awash with this orange color, because it's high summer, and the grasses become not silver or green, but they become almost sort of copper color. And then maybe a week later, the desert turns into snow. And so the architecture it was designed and built to extend this, as I wrote about my own studio in the house, this 1,000 memories to dream of and memories to possess. And so with that in mind, this little project is one of the projects I have enjoyed the most in my 40 plus adventure in architecture. And it came through very unexpected liaison. I just happened to receive the message from this Buddhist, Won Buddhism, and I want to clarify what that is. I have always dreamed of doing some kind of sacred space. I have tried several times, but the question was always the same: how many chapels have you done? How many, that kind of question. And he said, well, no, but I'm anxious to do one, but that didn't work either. But anyway, but in this case, this lovely Buddhist, she called me and asked if I would consider designing this little temple for them. And I said, well, yeah, of course, and can we meet, I don't know, 2 weeks later. And then they sent me some information, and I was immediately captivated by, I didn't know much about Won Buddhism. And Won Buddhism, I want to clarify, is a distinct and very unique form of Buddhism. Is quite modern. It's a reformed modern practice, as the conversation that we'll have with Patricio alerts us to. It was established in 1916 when the most devastating affliction upon the world, World War I, made certain individuals across the planet realize that humanity had turned decisively the wrong turn. And this particular Buddhist Shaswan decided that it was the distance between the mind and the material world. And the mind for this particular group of Buddhists is in fact the spirit. Had become so unbreachable, so distant from each other, that humanity was doomed to destroy itself. In many of his writings, which I have read, there is always that sense of both. And if you, these are some of the quotes. This is the book that the Master Buddhist wrote, and these are some of his scriptures where he's saying, and he wrote this in 1916. That it's like he's writing, of course, for us today. People's eyes and minds have been seduced by these flashy products. The human spirit, which should be making use of these material things, has become so weak that it cannot help but be enslaved by the material rather than the master of it. Therefore, he urges us to use the mind, which is the master of all dharmas. And dharma is prayer. So when I met Mrs. Won and Minister Choi, who were my client, we met in this little house that they had purchased in this very beautiful site. It's about almost 3/4 of an acre, and it was always flooded because it's very low. This is an area of Houston called Spring Branch, and there was this little house about 1,600 square feet, and they needed a small building of approximately 6,000 square feet. They were devastated that the city of Houston mandates for that amount for you to have 40 automobiles, for instance, which doesn't make sense, but that's how the city rules in its imperative. And so this project took 6 years to construct for a series of events, from COVID to Harvey, to the freeze, but the most difficult one was dealing with the city of Houston, that they kept our permit for almost 3 years, and I would have to go and intercede and negotiate with them to make them aware that this was a very different kind of religious facility. But this is the context, this is what surrounds our site. These are all the things that you encounter, and thank you, Frank, for helping me with this image, because I needed this image, but it didn't want to appear earlier when I did a test, and I said, oh, how polite, because they want to show our New York friends what Houston looks like sometimes, but it's the reality of this place. And some of these become small congregations of different types. But this part of Houston is fascinating because it's, oops, sorry. Oh, I lost one slide. I was going to show you a slide that is the entirety of the city, and this little dot, the Spring Branch, is about 10 miles from downtown Houston. But it's a very popular area with immigrants. In the early beginnings of Houston history, the future German Americans migrated to this part. Now it's mostly Latin nationalities, some Asians like Koreans and Malaysians, and so the place is in a constant state of impermanence as well. But this is what happens, and once in a while you get this beautiful little building like the one here, and I kept fantasizing every time, because that's on the way to, you see all of these buildings on the way to our site, so every visit to the site we will always see all these buildings, and I always loved that little building, and I wanted to do something with it. But in the first, this is one of the first drawings that I did on the project, and I'm always working with the fastest tool is still available to any of us, which is drawing. And in this little drawing, I felt that the Buddhists were very sad that they felt they were going to have to cut the trees. And I said, no, there's no way we can do that. And that's why it took 3 years, because the city demanded all of this parking, and I said, we cannot have all of that parking. It's going to kill the trees and all that. And so we argued, but in this little drawing was before we developed the project, but the synergy of the relationship of the building was to turn the original house, instead of north to south, we would turn it east to west to guarantee that all the trees could be saved. And in that way, in one of the early proposals, we wanted to place the building as if it was a kind of luminous citadel that defended itself in the context where it is, because it's surrounded by a repair shop where they repair Camaros, Mustangs. So all day long you're hearing these engines going vroom, vroom, and then on the right there is a steelworks fabricator that wanted to buy the property from the Buddhists in typical Houston fashion, offered them a lot because they wanted to expand, and the Buddhists always, in their kind ways, said thank you, but no thanks. And but this is the context, as you can see, and this is the final building there. And we save all the trees. All of the trees were saved. We only lost a pear tree, which was in the middle of the parking area. And we were able to reduce the parking zone, and the city finally approved our proposal. And the way we managed to do it was, the problem is, it's a fascinating anecdote, because the Dharma Hall, which is the main volume, is the central element in the architecture. The Buddhists needed, let's say, 60 5 by 5 or 25 square feet, 60 spaces or 40 spaces. But the city of Houston was saying, well, but that's 1,600 square feet of space, and that means that it's equal to 22 cars. So I said, well, yes, but they come in bicycles, and they have Uber. Anyway, so you can just imagine. But here you see that it's a very simple layout. The first part of the building, there are 2 squares with this link in the middle, it's a transition area. But the front square is kind of the daily activities, the library, the common kitchen they meet. There's only 40 congregants in this. It's the largest one in Houston. There's only 1,100,000 Buddhists in the world. And Houston has 40 of them, and they meet in this place. So we place 40 of them, and then there's offices, a small gallery. And in section you see the way the building was organized, so that in the front, to preserve the sanctity of the Dharma Hall, we place all of this cumulative program from the Buddhist residences to the visitor residences. They have ministers that come from all over the world, and the library. All of that works as a kind of pillow that shelters from the sound of this major street. And the temple, the Dharma Hall, the praying hall, is protected in the back. As I said, we were working, the project was also slowed down because of these 3 events, from Harvey to COVID to freeze. And COVID had an effect because we started very much building since we were so delayed. And at the time that we started building, all the prices were tripling, doubling. So it was another difficult time. But eventually we got to build it, and you see here, and I show you these pictures because you can start to see how the trees were saved and very trimmed to preserve them. Another big issue was the roof, because the concern with the water, we raised the property, we created this internal system, but I wanted the roof to be very, we use this galvanized steel panels, and then with this similar coping to create this very large baskins for the water to flow easily, because the site tended to flood all the time. And so those relationships were very important. Another very important relationship was how to mitigate the extreme sound of these neighbors. And so we created this exterior area with a kind of cushion of greenery to provide sound insulation. And also in these sketches, which are in the exhibition, you can see them, but these are also the process drawings that I do everything in my sketchbooks. They're really my screen, so to speak, except unlike the computer screen, it's always folding. And this is that garden protection that I was telling you about, and you will see it in a moment. But this drawing, this is another type of drawing that I engage in, and it's when from the sketches to the more formal drawings, and then from then on we start doing more digital drawings. But in this drawing is an important drawing, which is also here, which I have given to the Academy as a gesture for the generosity. And in this drawing, you see the meaning of locating the building east to west, anchored by that amazing tree, that I began to see in this tree, this sort of circumference, this echo of the symbol, because the Won in Korean means a circle. And so it was like destined to feel this circumference in a way. And this very beautiful construction photographs, which I always love, and I wanted to live it like this, but it didn't work. No, I mean, it wouldn't work. And this is, I don't know if this is in the exhibition, but this was we had to commission the very important symbol. They only have one symbol, and it's this ring, and it has to be the right proportion. And so we kept making different sizes. And this one is outside my studio. This one was, I was traveling somewhere, and then we started playing with the scale, and then eventually we found the right proportion. And so I brought our client to the site, and they always do this beautiful gesture like this, which I have actually adopted. They're so contagious in their graciousness. And so here you see the tree, you see the Camaro shop on the left, which sadly, when Paul Hester, who is the author of all these photographs, went, it was a Saturday, so I said, oh, you should have gone on a Friday. It's when all the Camaros are, you know, boom, boom, and then the other building on the right. And so, what I was trying to say earlier is one cannot ignore the context where this takes place. But architecture in these moments of transience, in these eternal, ephemeral moments that architecture is able to produce. As I said at the beginning, I never speak much about form, because form doesn't really exist. Form is formless in the sense that it is the accumulation of these events that are like this beautiful picture that I love that Paul Hester was waiting for something, and then one of the ministers had to bring the cushions, and he just took this picture, and it will only exist. It existed in that ephemeral moment, and in so many ways, as I wrote earlier on my own personal project, they are endless, and they go on and they go on and they go on and go on, and even when a building becomes a ruin, they go on and they go on, and you know, in Houston to live 40 years is considered antiquity, and I guess my own personal project will be antiquity in Houston, because structures, if they last their mortgage cycle, you feel lucky. There are other buildings, of course, that survive, but those are more civic, but in terms of the matter of the city, the fabric of the city is very disposable, very fragile, and very totally unsustainable. And it keeps it spreading. It's like a fog, like a mist that takes over the entire plains of this part of Texas. But here you see, this is very important because we created this little garden that is echoes the Dharma Hall. So it creates this cushion with this ivy, so it mitigates, it muffles the sound. And I love it in the winter when the cycles of the grass turns into this beautiful golden color, or the ivy becomes this amazing calligraphy of leaves. And they live like this. They have no. We got a little bit of money since we didn't have to have so many parking spaces, so we were able to get some more donations. And I went to this friend of mine who runs a company called Sunset Settings. It sells furniture. And we got a Mendes de Rocha chair, which the Buddhists love because it rocks and makes them happy. And they just sit there and watch that tree that became such a talisman for the project. And everywhere you are in the building, whether you're in one of the private rooms, you always get these episodic glimpses of the trees, and they multiply in this kind of endless carnival of possibilities and experiences. And that's moving to the Dharma Hall. And that's how they practice their faith. And they have this very beautiful drum that you see there on the left. And it has this magical sound that fills the volume. And they, when they exercise the services, they bring it. And as I got so fascinated by the Buddhists that I somehow, although I was raised Catholic, maybe a Buddhist Catholic or something, because I found so many amazing things. Every faith has something to offer humanity in all of its despairing moments. But I have found that the Buddhists seem to be so ahead of practically so many other faiths, and they seem to have this principle of conviviality, living together, accepting what comes with such grace. I remember every meeting with them because they just have this, it emanates from them with such power. And in reading the teachings of satsang, I read this, but it was after the fact, and I again, like I wrote a book, a text about this building in a publication for it, and I call it the circularity of things. And when I first came to the site, I was not aware of this beautiful passage, and I will read it for you. And it says, tracing the Won on the ground. By the roadside there were several huge pine trees that were exceptionally gorgeous. Someone said, how I would love to transplant them to our temple. Then the founding master said, the old pine tree and our temple are both within our boundaries. Within are included, without exception, infinite arcane principles, infinite treasures, and infinite creative transformation. And I realized upon reading this, not only the intuition of all of us involved in the project, but the magic of that ring, that circle, that is empty, that is full at the same time. I'm going to end with this two images because I know you must think I fooled you thinking I'm from Texas, but I'm not. My Texas accent gave me away. But I actually was born in this place, and some of my dear friends said to me often, well, why are you in Houston? I said, well, because I like it. And maybe it's because maybe the paradise has also its own drawbacks. And when I go to Costa Rica, I see how paradise can be its opposite as we consume our planet with such voraciousness. It's now that my parents were coffee farmers, and there's very few of them left. Everybody's selling their properties to big investors, hotels, because Costa Rica has become ecological destination. The rainforest that so dearly I remember is slowly being sacrificed for greed, which is that you feel in the blank. But this image I wanted to share with you because this is what happens. This is very near where I grew up. And the rainforest is a magical place where the clouds slowly move and they descend upon the landscape. And they make everything that seems permanent and eternal be suddenly transient, be impermanent. And I remember as a child, my parents' house and farm didn't exist anymore. But I found this one that is very similar. And I can tell you the story because I will be outside, very, very a child. And suddenly these clouds that you saw in that image, as you see them already arriving, they will be so dense that they will obliterate everything. And I had to get back to the house somehow, which was dangerous because you could fall and you could hurt yourself, or a snake, or all the animals of the rainforest are there all at once because they pray for this rain. And everything will disappear. But when I would go into the house, there was this sense of comfort, this sense of relaxation, this sense of like everything was the center of the world at once, even though everything around me seemed so impermanent, so changeable. And so I hope I have tried to convey more to the agency of the introduction and my reflections, my insights about sites of impermanence, which are really what architecture produces galore. But I want to end with this quote because I love this quote by the Swiss American photographer Robert Frank. And I'll read it and I will end there. I suppose my photographs, I could substitute that for my sites of impermanence, are of things I don't want to forget. My instinct tells me that they are important. They're quiet. They demand no attention. They're not empty. That's it. Thank you.
to follow that. Yes. Thank you, Carlos, for that beautiful explanation of your work. I've prepared several thoughts and questions, and most likely you have touched on those, but you can profundizar, en español, have to go deeper, if you will. And first, maybe we should sort of address, I would like to address the question of impermanence as you have done so beautifully throughout your work. But to go back, as a historian, I like to always go back, to Rossi's characterization, right? That he said that your work was an analogous fragility of timeless wonder, and that's the complete sort of citation, quote. It has been some time since there. So I guess my first question is, do you agree with that characterization? And second is, how 30 years of magnificent work, right, allowed you to sort of think of that or elaborate on this proposition of the fragility of wonder?
Thank you. Sorry, I think you have to turn off yours, I think.
You're good.
Oh, okay, good. No, thank you for that comment. I appreciated that you brought Rossi, who was someone that I got to know, actually, and he wrote the prelude to my first book, which that's where you quoted. And Rossi had a deep impact on my development, because at the time I was a student, it was a very difficult time for architecture. When hasn't it been? But in that particular time, there were two schools which were, modernism was in the gutter, so to speak. It had been the value of any social purpose. It was basically a commercialization of the principles. And then there were two offerings. One was called postmodernism, which was a revisionist view of architecture. And then high tech, which was a different kind of postmodernism, but more baroque in intentions to different means, same purposes. And so I was very distraught. And in fact, I thought of changing my discipline, and I wanted to be a writer. I started to accumulate courses in writing. But then I came across John Haydock, and then of course Aldo Rossi, Luis Barragan, and they were kind of my anchor in that strange world at the time, because they really spoke about what interested me about architecture. And so when Rossi felt that in his, I already had known him for like 5 years, because I had one of my first clients was a printer. We did a little building for them. They do prints with different artists. And he asked me who will do prints. And I said, well, the only architect I know who does prints is Aldo Rossi. And so we brought him to Houston, and we engaged in the beginnings of a relationship that sadly ended too soon, as he died young. But anyway, and when he wrote that, I was amazed that he could feel that same revelation he felt about my work, I also felt about his work and the work of the others that I mentioned. And so I think there is, it's not that I agree or disagree, it's just that I really believe in this circularity. I think that there is really very little new in the world. What is always new is how we complement it, with our own life stories. And that's what brings really the true invention of the world. The sun still rises, the hatreds still exist. If I were to look at that mirror, I would jump out the window. But I look at a different mirror, which is the possibility of the future as as Steiner used to say, the most wonder of the human possibility, that the future not as something you sell, but the future in the sense of who is going to take us further through those personal narratives. So in many ways, that's what I find intriguing about architecture, because architecture is always at least for me, my definition is always the same rooms that aspire to different things, and then how do you direct them in ways that are new, but you don't know they're new, or they're old and you don't know they're old, or they're ancient. It's a very complex subject for me, and in terms of understanding it even, and so I try to do it through the work and find sympathetic clients that, and those that might not work with us. Life is too short.
Just to go back to that moment of the, I guess, the late 70s in Houston, this was a moment of Philip Johnson and Berger,
Yes.
right? Penso Plaza,
Yes.
the Transco Tower, it's an all glass, all mirror architecture, which, just to play in turn, is a different definition of impermanence. Right?
Well, it's a difference of impermanence more because it's driven by the market. And if you think about Pensoil, it's a great building, there's no question, but it was really driven by commerce. I mean, Gerald Hines was delighted that Johnson came out with this double tower, and he immediately didn't see the virtue as a work of architecture. He said, oh, I can have 2 tenants. And immediately, and he said, wow, okay. And then that tower no longer, there's been so many occupants in that. And so and then Johnson came up with his period of Dutch redo with the Republic Bank, and that's no longer Republic Bank. So the impermanence I was also speaking about deals also with this fragility of the market. And the fragility that Rossi describes is there's a definition of fragility that I love, which is a tenderness towards space, towards light. I mean, I cannot tell you the immensity of moments that if I could write, and I wish I had the time, but just this morning before I left Houston at the crack of dawn, and I had to return because I forgot my phone, and suddenly this cloud came out of somewhere, I don't know, and it radiated something that, as I wrote, I've never seen before, and I just sat there, and I forget about the architecture. Because the architecture is that, you see, that's what I try to explain, and I think Rossi, is the only architect. I mean, Rossi had a very kind of, in my view, at the end, a kind of tragic life in many ways, because he became so in demand. I mean, everybody wanted, he was like an opera star, Aldo, and the man couldn't. I remember I saw him a few months before he died. He came to Houston, and he looked much older. He had been heavily, that's why he had the accident, heavily drinking. I mean, the whole thing was a disaster, and it pained me to see this great thinker. And so, but the thing about, and I say, I remember, I read him more than I visited the cemetery, I visited just a few works, because, but the Teatro del Mondo was so beautiful. It was just, it was the essence of what I'm really talking about. That is this little theater that goes from town to town. And what it's building is not its architecture, it's building the memory of its architecture, which is what Rossi spoke about and influenced not only me, but many others. And right now in the circle that we move in, he'll come back some more time because like this table, we can't, every time I hear that we're moving in a line, I said, well, yes, as long as the line is circular, because we haven't been able to escape it. And maybe the Buddhists figure it out because their pursuit is the fullness of emptiness. And that's why I ended with that quote. And we are obsessed with possessing the world, with destroying the world, and I ask, right now I'm reading 3 books on my bed table. One is on the Romans, one is on Lincoln and immigration, and another one is on Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Bosso. No, sorry. What's the guy from? What's the name of the? Oh God, I can't believe I have one of the new titans of industry. Bezos, yes, thank you.
One of those.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating.
I think you were going to say Bozos.
I said that?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't in tech. Oh God. I published That's not it. No, I don't have that nerve in me.
So I'm going to keep pressing on this question of impermanence because we have this notion of
Maybe I haven't answered.
it's like no, just keep at it because you mentioned the question of impermanence in architecture, and you've, I think, very beautifully sort of presented how you personally manage it. You've also mentioned, we discussed here the impermanence of kind of the market and its kind of all in its own sort of processes. But also you mentioned that you were in Houston and you just had to go back because you forgot your phone. Right?
I guess I had my ticket.
which brings up perhaps yet one more twist in our fate of the impermanence of our lives, which has to do with technology, right? And the whole question of obsolescence, right? And how in a way it kind of marks our present as an ever changing and perpetual disintegration. And there's this quote by Marx, which I always love, and a statement by Marx that I always love, which is, all that is under capitalism, all that is solid melts into air.
Yeah.
It's a very, very famous passage in Capital. Right? So,
Which he took from Shakespeare.
Yes,
from the
right. This is the grand tradition. So I guess my question to you, in all these kind of levels of impermanence that if we inhabit, we're constantly moving, right? Is designed in a strategy, right, to navigate this kind of perpetual disintegration of the world, and is it a form? Is there a possible dialogue between these kind of all forms, between the market, technology, and this approach to architecture?
No, it's a provocative
Sorry.
question. No, but let's start with the phone first. I mean, I'm a newie on the iPhone world because I resisted for so many years, and I had a flip phone for my students know that, but I didn't do it to be a contrarian. I just didn't see the need, and I said I don't need more intransigency or more just I had enough. I mean, every day to me, I wrote in that passage that every day is enormous. A day is not 1 minute in TikTok or 5 minutes. A day is enormous. It lasts 24 hours, and 24 hours that are in, as I call it, in this circular metric that is eternal. So you're talking about, and so to sacrifice things because somebody's selling us eternity or some eternal life in minutes, I'm not interested in that. And I had to finally, I accidentally got my phone in Mexico City, and the poor thing blasted into pieces. And so I had to succumb and go get, and I don't like it. That's why I keep forgetting it all the time. But I have no choice because my ticket is in the phone. So, and I cannot, they don't send you print, whatever. But the thing is that I try to, and this is why my architecture has this determination that I want the architecture to be so inobtrusive, so it's like a table. The table doesn't tell me, well, I am a great table. I have 4 legs and I have phone and I have you know, I could care less what you tell me. I'm interested in the table. And what does the table do for me? Well, I can sit next to it, I can put my book, I can put my iPad, or I can put my cup of coffee. I can think of 1,000 ways of my life being enriched by acknowledging that the solution are not in all of these toys that we keep being sold to. So humanity is just, of late, is it's like the Pied Piper, you know, and the different Pied Pipers. Now there's several. There's one that will send his car to Mars, and he wants you to join him there someday with his Tesla, and he's going to be around. I mean, that's how absurd the world has become. And the absurdity is multiplied because we now invented something worse than the Pandora box. We invented, quote, social media, whatever that means, which has been a destructive demon to the other demons that the humanity already has to suffer. And so this new demon that was meant to bring us closer is taking us apart. And one that is extremely dangerous, as you know. And now there's AI, and then I don't know what comes next. So I have a very skeptical view of technology, because and by technology I don't mean that I refuse. I mean I'm glad I can come from Houston to New York in 2.5 and 45 minutes, and but maybe I feel guilty that I burn a few along my other passenger members, but I wanted to be here. I wanted to thank the Academy here and give this talk. So, but I just wonder if, you know, there's another Buddhist aphorism that I love. This is when you have such abundance, if you don't know how to make of that abundance something of value, you are destined to poverty. But of course, they mean poverty of the spirit. And I think that that's kind of our situation today. We have, I mean, why I looked everywhere in the world: Haiti, Gaza, Hungary, Venezuela, you name it. And then we go out selling toys to distract us from what is there. And so that's why I was saying that architecture has for me, and I'm speaking how I feel about architecture, for me it's so elemental. It's like bread, like water, like light. It's just, it has to be that, so that it sustains the human being by finding why they come to be here in the first place. And you know, like, and you don't have to be minimal if you think that might work. Some people call it.
Like minimal?
Yeah, well, you can call it, but you know, you could be. I remember being in Alvar Aalto's house, the Villa Mayera, and I stayed there one night, and I said, what a happy man this man. I mean, I know he was happy because he loved to.
So that brings me to another question.
The students.
Yeah. So
that's another story. Or another, no. Sorry.
Over drinks. Your architecture gestures, and I think you've demonstrated, to nature's temporal cycles, right? They're analogous, but they're not necessarily the same. Right?
Yes.
I don't think architecture
Yeah, no, I appreciate
natural production.
Yeah.
All right. So, but let's talk about form.
Yeah.
Right. We have, at least from my interpretation, we have volumetric clarity, right?
Yes.
We have cubes, we have
Yes.
volumes and voids, we have right angles,
Yeah.
we have free facades,
Mhm.
we have free plans, we have a discrete architectural details, and very precise use of materials. So here's my question:
Yeah.
Are you a modernist?
Well, it's just that I don't know, you know, that, no, I appreciate what you just mentioned, because I don't want the audience to think that I disregard form. In fact, I don't. What I meant is that for me, it's always the result of something bigger than form, that cannot be contained by form. So the form is, I love, I love my little cubes, boxes, and they're called, but I love them because, like for instance, in my studio house, I think 32, I've been doing all kinds of things. Now I'm moving my studio to an apartment that I built, because I sold the other properties. And now I'm moving my studio back to, and each of these cubes gives me all this flexibility, and they don't change. Maybe I add a window, it's fantastic. It's like being in total freedom. The problem we have today is that we assume that because we have all these tools, that form is just a new delectation for a picnic, when the world is not a picnic. And so we bring all kinds of things that more and more make architecture totally impossible. And I don't have much interest in that. I don't follow it very much because I'm happy with my cubes or my boxes. And let me have my happiness with my boxes because they're endless. They're radical to me. I mean, try to remodel a building that is so singularly shaped. I mean, it's a calamity for clients. Because they have such singularity that you cannot. I mean, I cut a wall. Okay, I have an 8x. The thing is that my boxes are all concrete blocks, so they're not so easy to. If they were just 2x4s, but still, I love that freedom. But going back to your question, I think that it's I don't know really. I guess yes, I have modern details and by modern I mean that modern is a term that I always have suspect with. I remember when Arthur Rimbaud used to describe in the Illuminations the concept of modern. Adolphe Loos would describe it as crime and ornament, Le Corbusier, and so everybody had a definition of modern. Or Aldo Rossi, when he was asked, "Are you a postmodernist?" And he said, "How can I be a postmodernist when I've never been a modernist?" And so it's a. But I think in terms of answering your question, yes, I believe in the modern project as an idea that we are. For me, the built object, the artifact, what we produce, I make enormous effort to build well. I mean, this is on the very severe limits. I mean, that little temple, we build parking, landscape, wood floor. It's not engineered floor, solid 3/4, 8-inch floor, custom granite, marble vanities for the monks. And we built it for $1,200,000. And it's a brick that we brought, a very beautiful Roman brick, which costs 3 times more than the bricks. That project, when I tell the cost to a builder, and they get red on the face because they're selling this less square footage for $1.5 million, and it has a brick facade, and behind it is just paper mache, which is just some thin wood product to look like. And the first era came, you have your facade standing there proudly, like in the Old West, but the rest has gone. And I think that the being a modern architect or designer or entrepreneur implies that you have to be built well, because the opposite is what the market satiates on. And that's going to destroy, it's already destroying 3/4% of Houston. I look every day, I go by and I see these constructions, and the criteria of the public is so menial. How do we solve this problem that we have on Beach? When you see those images, how do you contain this monster? How do you control it in a way that, not for control, but to make it less catastrophic to the environment? What happens in the suburban city, it was solved with this idea of freedom. That's why I call it the illusion of freedom. Is there more incarceration than leaving your work and spending 2 hours back and forth every day in a car? Because the city is ruled by the market, so they hike the prices of what people could be living denser, or fear of the other, or whatever. There's so many social economic phenomena in cities like Houston, and it's going to be the third largest city in the country. There's nothing stopping it because everybody's moving there with this idea that the illusion of freedom. And what is that? That's another question like modern.
So it is about form,
Yeah.
even though you say it is really not about form. Well, I get very nervous when architects start saying it is not about form. It's, what do you mean?
That's why I clarify. That's why I clarify that. But it's just that I don't like to talk about it. Maybe that was a better answer because I don't. It's not that it doesn't interest me. I'm sorry if I sent that message.
No.
Quite the opposite. I think formally all the time. I say, well, if I have we're doing this house in Miami now, and I think, okay, if we do this 24 by 48, I can, I'm constantly thinking, but I'm thinking in the beautiful idea of modernity where standardization or elements like that, or repetition, or all those things that I want to live in a city of very few monuments. What I mean by that is that now every building wants to be a monument. And every building wants to claim authority over everybody else, and I don't think that's going to be a happy world, because that means that everything is going to be Houston-like. And I don't know if that's a recommendation. I think that ironically, the city of the future, in my view at least, is the Mediterranean city for many reasons, because of the compactness, the density. It creates a thermal mass. It's repetitious. Every once in a while, there's a monument here and there, a park. Now, is that a possible city still, or are we really condemned to live in the city of the market, which is Houston? And I don't know I don't have an answer either. But all I can do is work to experiment and see how we can offer alternatives. Because the challenge is enormous. If you talk about, everybody talks about climate change, but talk about the catastrophe of a city built in this monoculture of single houses spreading relentlessly. Go to Austin, the same phenomenon. Go to Dallas. These are the cities that are being forged and made without implementing any sense of, Houston has no regulations on that. Okay. At least Dallas attempts that. Austin is, anyway, as you can see, it's too vast. But I didn't answer your question. I apologize.
It's a pattern here.
Yes. I've been accused of being elliptical.
I want to open up to the public, but before that, I want to say that perhaps you can be characterized as being part of a Latin American diaspora. You came to the United States pretty young, but you have made your life and practice here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you have certain distance. Maybe here I'm projecting a certain distance with kind of Latin America. I guess my question would be, how do you manage these two cultural worldviews, these two cultural approaches or ways of being in yourself and does it reflect in your architecture?
No, I appreciate your question. I feel very content in that regard because I'm more of a hybrid in the sense that I live in these two worlds, and next week after that I'm going to a congress in Querétaro, Mexico, where there's going to be architects from Canada, from the US, from South America, from India. It's a great congress, and it's a fantastic community of architecture in the Americas that doesn't get the respect, I would say, or even the inclusivity that it should. at UT, Texas, I remember with Wilfred Wong, we used to work together with Kevin Alter and Michael Benedict to do latitudes, where we looked at the Americas as a series of layers of very rich architecture. And I always was, I taking students to many places, from Peru to Chile, Argentina, Colombia, everywhere, and trying to expand the meaning of America. Because I remember when I became a US citizen, the dean at the time welcomed me back because it was the day of a faculty meeting. He says, well, I want to congratulate our colleague Carlos, who just became an American. And then one of my colleagues said, I beg to correct you, but he's always been an American. He just became a US citizen. And I think that's part of the, until we understand the power that singularization of the word America has to years south of El Paso or other parts, because America is a fascinating experiment that deals with a quadron of cultures and fantastic richness there. And you know, I love mestizaje, which is, for the audience, that means the mixing of all the ethnicities to produce new possibilities for humanity, you know, and that's why I think that if we could imagine that America really was a kind of like a dream, you know, like if somebody dreamt America, you know, it will be this fusion of so many things, and the United States has the right to call itself America in some ways, even though it sounds too aggressive sometimes, but because it really represents the quadrum of the entire world. So America, if America represents this hope, this optimism that could happen sadly, it's not happening in Venezuela right now, but it could someday. And maybe it's happening in Chile again, I don't know. But America has always represented this possibility of correcting or propelling a new horizon, you know. And so I remain optimistic, but we have to look at the entire continent. You know, there are two continents here, two Americas, and they all, the two of them become really one powerful force. And you know, ironically, historically, the possibilities today in the United States of this changing of you know, the populations and immigrations of all kinds. I mean, it's just fulfilling the destiny of that original America, you know, and how it was stipulated. So I'm very optimistic, even though the political icicles right now are not warming up.
I'm sure that there's questions. Maybe everybody has. Yes.
Do I need a microphone?
Go for it.
So I really appreciate, Carlos, your kind of, how can I say, your appreciation of the title, Sites of Impermanence.
Yes, I fell in love right away.
I mean, it kind of came from our studio visit with you on Zoom, talking about Houston, and I wanted to ask a question about, like, how have architectural practices shifted in response to sort of climate instability in a place like Houston, or thinking about, which was the hurricane in 2017, like.
Yeah, Harvey.
That happened, and I mean, I can think of this in a sequence in my own lifetime.
Yes.
And some of it's not about even, some of it's, you know, terrorism, maybe
Yeah.
9/11 and the impact on that site. But thinking about Houston in particular, are there examples of shifts in the way that people are working to respond to that impermanence?
No, absolutely. It's a great question, because, you know, like, I used to give a lecture where I show, you know, if I go to a school of architecture, I would show a lecture where I would try to express how necessary it was to build with 2x6s instead of 2x4s. Such a simple request, and I would calculate that I would increase the cost by, let's say, $1.35 or whatever. And I would use the tools of capitalism to negotiate with my clients so I could build a better product. Because I'm driven by an ethical purpose about architecture. The architecture, as I said, yes, I care about form, I care about materials, I care about the city, all of these things that we're all dealing with. But I also care about the heartbreaking reality that people spend their whole life savings, their whole hopes, and they get this inferior product. And you know, in Houston, there are all these scaffoldings everywhere. You go find them. These houses are deteriorating from the inside because they're sealed so tightly. Because the fear is that you're going to lose air conditioning. And so, oh God, yes, God forbid. And I have air gaps all over my windows and my doors, and it doesn't increase my cost because I insulate the place well. I don't place windows on the west. I try to, for instance, keep the temperature at 77 degrees. My bills are very minimal. You go see these houses that they're selling for the $1.5 million that I mentioned near my neighborhood, and all you hear all day long is the compressors. And there you are reading whatever you are reading or having breakfast. And then you see these things that totally, I panic when I see that, totally designed against any logic. The simple, most creative act of an architecture is orientation. How do you, it's as ancient as bread or wine, and that seems to be thrown out the window. So you see these townhouses, new houses facing the brutal west sun in Houston that from 1 o'clock is relentless till 8:30 in the evening. You get a full day from 1 o'clock of intense heat. And then not only that, but the house is not modest in terms of 1800, which was considered, now they're gluttonous, they're, I don't know, 6,000. They just built a house in my neighborhood where they left cut all the trees. They built the minimum 5 feet to the property line with the front facade of brick, and 90% is hardy plank, which is this very thin concrete board. Fortunately, they had 2x6 construction. And why do I insist on that? Because you can have more insulation, you can build a better insulating package. So our revolutions are always in very small fractions, because we're dealing with a dragon which is called capitalism has no mercy. You know, it's a dragon that let loose devours everything. And so, yes, there's been many attempts to create enlightened capitalism, social democracies, examples in the world where it's working. But when the single engine is this capital, I mean, I'm hearing about the elections, and I can't believe the ignorance of the public that thinks that the decision that is a monumental decision is decided on 10 cents per gas upcharge or whatever. And I said, is this the level of enlightenment that we have achieved for all that we have suffered? I think about this all the time. And I don't have an answer either, but all I can do is with my little boxes in my taller, whatever you want to call them, I don't mind. They're friendly to me, they don't bite, they don't ask for anything, they just do their job. And they give me such enormous happiness. And to my clients, I just got a picture from a house we just finished in Santa Fe. Another box, a little bit askew. Yes, I can do askew. Just so that the mountains could be seen better. And they sent me this beautiful note saying, why are you here? We're drinking this wonderful white wine, looking at the mountains. And I just feel, yes, but I have to be with my friends in New York. So anyway, I talked too long, but if there's another question, thank you for your patience, for indulging me. It's such a captive, attentive audience, so thank you. And so nice to see you. student from our school. I'm very touched. That's really means a lot.
So, following up on that question and your
Yes.
comment and your
Oh, I
position with respect to capitalism.
I thought you wanted to end. Sorry.
No. I have much more, but I will let you go in 5 minutes. I said saying that. So this is a question about the relationship of architecture and the public sphere, which many people have said is a very tenuous one. Right? And the question is, do you think architecture is the marginal practice in the United States?
Today?
Yes, today. Yeah. As an architect practicing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, and you know, I mean, there's just, for instance, in Houston, I'll give you an example, 95% of what gets built is done through this, let us say, consortiums of developers with designers, architects, engineers, everybody. And they're building enormous quantities of work. And it's like, I look at, one building looks one way, the other one looks the other way. Nobody asks, can we talk about how we share the sidewalk? Can we talk about how we can, nobody's asking those questions because the private realm is so dominant. Everything is singularized to the individual. So that, the revolution right now in Houston, ironically, is that density is arriving in some way. And that's good. That means that where you could put one house, now you can put 6. That's a major shift of awareness for the city. I wish they were better built. That's always my contention because I think that, if I go to a good doctor, I just had some surgery this summer, fantastic. I felt, God, I spend my money well spent, and I'm really, he's saying to me, and because of the professionalism that I'm sure I could have been maybe damaged by another doctor. Architecture is no protection either. A lot of you'll be surprised how much issues it creates in just by lack of detailing or inattentiveness to other things, other consequences. And one of the most fascinating things is that I don't see that happening. For instance, I go a lot to Latin America, as you mentioned, and architecture has a lot of agency there. The people care for. I'm amazed that I just visited this project in Guadalajara by these friends of mine in Mexico, and they build these amazing apartments, and I asked how much they cost. And it was 1/7 of the cost of this disposable units that they just built of similar size near my studio house. 1/8. Now that's the economics of that. You can see it, but and the thing is that there are rules that there are of course seismic rules. But going back to Sarah's question about is there a change with the acknowledgement of climate upheavals in the world? And when Harvey happened, it happened in the most surreal way, as I said. And all that could have been avoided if there was a rule that said that for 5 feet of your house, you had to have a concrete block, because maybe in the 500, 1,000 floor, that's the limit. When I built my first studio, and the people, my neighbors would come and say, "What are you doing there? You building a Citadel or a 7-Eleven?" Because the concrete block is seen as the most inexpensive and actually is the most durable material. So it's the economics is always playing with taste and with paradigms of historicist value, like, oh, I want my this or my the other. and architects have no say in any of that. So, at least in my city.
But you're an educator also.
Yeah. Well,
right?
we try. Yeah,
But should we not be training our students not to be designers, but for people, for
No,
example,
we're trying to,
in the public realm, to be in government, to be legislators?
No, absolutely, Patricio. We're trying to do that, but we also, I mean, it's a good time to be in architecture today because this younger generation is not so interested in those, let's say, equations of the status of design. You know, in the sense that they're interested in bringing service to the world. They're going to inherit all of our mistakes, as they will also do their own mistakes, and that's the nature of this circular journey that we're all involved in. But I think that we try to, for instance, we're now talking more about the ecological damage of how can a foundation do less damage, how can materials not just be simply to give more square footage, but to think more about the quality of those materials instead of
the toxicity of materials.
the toxicity of materials, all of those things. But it's a reawakening because this propensity that architecture has to not be realistic with the world, because building is one thing. Building is actually quite powerful. And there are many parts in the world where they build because they have to look out for generations to come. Most transactions, at least in Houston, are just, I'll buy this house, I'll sell it in 5 years, and I'll make this amount, and then I'll move further down or whatsoever. So it's brutal. I mean, it's just, and I don't know how we change that mode of thinking, but we're going to have to do something in some microwave, and that sounds like the microwave, I meant microwave.
Sorry. I guess it's which I think your projects is what they do. They actually involve in what we can call micropolitics.
Yes.
The politics on the ground, the politics of
Exactly.
negotiating with the city government to say we need to save these streets, and then doing those battles. Right? And it is actually not anymore, right, in asking for the big structural changes, but that the changes can actually be done, right, on the ground and at a small scale, and that it will actually take time as you actually demonstrate that architecture in the end.
Yeah, but for instance, a city like Barcelona, that's an amazing city. Is it because it's beautiful? Is it because it has Cerda as a planet? No, it's because people are committed to live in a city that sustains everyone. That every architect produces objects in that city that benefit this larger enterprise. And we only produce in cities that benefit singular enterprises. And that's going to, default at the end. And it's in evidence everywhere. So I hope that we train our students, at least at the school, to be critical thinkers, to go out and fight with whatever they have, but they're. And we have to transform what profit means. I always talk to my clients. I said, profit is a fascinating word. Have you looked its definitions? And they, oh yeah. I said, what profits you to just profit? And I make strange questions to my clients. Sometimes I lose a client just with my questions because they're too philosophical for them, or maybe too strange. But the good ones stay. And I have a client that I've done now 8 projects in 35 years. My Marfa client, and 8 projects, and he wants to do 2 more. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to. I want to do other things. Anyway, but yes, I'm losing my voice, but unless it's yes.
I think with philosophical questions that sustain, a wondrous architecture, we can end. Thank you so much. I think we also have wine, so we can continue the conversation.